commissioners who are dedicated to embedding equity within each agency across the government enterprise. We asked every single person that we interviewed. We had 75 interviews, so those of you who are in here know about that process, right? And the common question for every single person was about diversity, equity, and inclusion. How have you done it in the past, and what is your vision for how we can incorporate it and make sure that it becomes the fiber and fabric of what we do every single day in state government. And as you can see in admin, it is alive and well. So the Office of Equity and Inclusion has been working, or our work around that area has been working to develop a system-wide strategy for inclusion and equity. And the goals of that office are to increase the cultural competency of staff across the entire enterprise. We've done a better job of recruiting people of color and Indigenous folks in state government. We have not done a great job of retaining folks. And that means that we need to be very intentional in our culture shift and culture change. So that is one of the things that we're working on. And as someone who comes from one of those communities and is now working in state government, I can feel that every day, and it's critically important. The second thing that we want to do is align our values and visions with behaviors and processes to operationalize equity within our state agencies. The third is to develop diverse and inclusive leadership ranks across the system so that our entire state agencies from top to bottom reflect the communities that we seek to represent. And then to disaggregate data to tell a more accurate and nuanced narrative about systematic inequities. And sometimes, folks get a little nervous about that. Those are those who wants pie moments. Those are those places and spaces where folks say, well, do we really have to disaggregate all the data? Yes, because that's the only way that we're going to know how we need to move forward and what changes we need to make. And our own policy department within the governor's office is centering our policy-making process around equity and inclusion and children. Specifically, that each agency submits a policy proposal for our consideration. They must answer questions about how their proposal will affect communities of color and Indigenous communities. They must also answer how the proposed policies will address inequities in different communities. And lastly, they must identify and elaborate on the potential positive and negative impacts that these policies will have on marginalized communities. And what this requires is that our state agencies are in relationship with people. And this is a change in some ways, that we are starting our policy-making process a lot earlier and saying, before you bring these policies to the governor and I for inclusion in the upcoming legislative session, we want to know who you talked to, what happened during those conversations, what kind of community support has been built for these initiatives, and how are you going to ensure that we have an inside-outside game to move these things forward. And that is new, and it's tricky. And it hasn't been easy for folks, but it is also what is required to make sure that we are moving policies and practices forward that folks feel good about, communities can see themselves reflected in, and will have long and lasting impact. And I want to be very clear that we do not see our role as giving voice to people who have historically been left out of the conversation, because that's not our job. Our communities have always had voices. It is our job to lift up those voices and amplify them as much as we can so that they are heard within the halls of power. That is what changes the conversation from communities asking state leaders, what are you doing about X issue? To, as someone who is directly affected by this policy, I think you should approach the issue this way. This is what our community is doing, and you need to lift it up. And that's the power of inclusion. Knowing the power of your own voice and feeling encouraged to share it, feel safe and supported to share it, so that you don't feel like your future is in the hands of state leaders, but instead you feel that you have a say, you have a voice, and you can bring solutions and make suggestions in the way of how we do the work across state governments. When that happens, we can actually make progress. The work that you do here every day matters, and the fact that you're here matters. There's plenty of work ahead of us, but I want you to know that our administration is committed to doing it with you, not to you, but with you. I want to thank you for being here, for taking the time to learn more about our processes, and for the work that you do every single day to make Minnesota an incredible place. So thank you for the work that you have done, and thank you for the work that we will do together. Chi miigwech. I appreciate it.